I'm John Batchelor. Thaddeus McCotter, my friend at WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes, and we turn to the final day. Well, we turn to the Affordable Care Act. Final day, set that aside. That's another metaphor. We turn to a day that was always said to be significant in the Affordable Care Act, March 31st, 2014. This is the day, so-called day, in which we are going to get an accounting of who signed up and the success of the program that was designed to help the uninsured, to give them an affordable way to manage their family's affairs. And I welcome our colleagues, Lara Brown of George Washington University and Francis Rose of Federal News Radio. Lara, I begin with you because there's news on Forbes.com. This is our colleague Ovik Roy reporting on a story that is now from the RAND Corporation in the hands of the Los Angeles Times. What do we learn from the RAND Corporation about the ACA? Good evening to you, Lara.
Good evening, John. Thanks for having me on. Well, what we basically learn is that, according to them, they agree that about 6 million people have signed up for health coverage on the new marketplaces, but only about a third of those people were previously uninsured. And when you look at sort of the deeper numbers, some of the other surveys and the like, you really end up with about a total of essentially 9 million or so people who have actually purchased health plans either directly from insurers or using the marketplaces. But the majority of those people were previously insured. In short, this law seems to be altering the healthcare market much more so than it seems to be doing what its original goal was, which was to make sure that everybody was covered.
Thaddeus, does that surprise you that the Affordable Care Act turns out to be for the people who are already on insurance plans and not for the people who are not?
It is a bit of a surprise, but very little about this poor piece of legislation seems to surprise anybody anymore. I guess the question for Lara is, do they have any plans to take a bigger bite out of the uninsured population?
You know, I think there is the hope and the belief that between the sort of tax penalties for not having insurance and the overall sort of incentives for purchasing insurance in the sense that your health care doesn't end up being sort of a catastrophic cost when you need it. I think certainly there is the hope and belief that over time this will roll out. The hard part is how affordable is it in the interim? And that has a lot to do with the numbers of people who are total enrolled in all of these programs.
Francis, you're reporting at Federal News Radio. You follow the federal government very carefully. We've all waited for numbers, and we're going to wait longer because the sign-up period is going to continue, and then what part of the sign-up paid, and what are the ages, the demographics, but all of that this report, this is RAND study, hasn't been published. Its contents made available to Noam Levy of Los Angeles Times, and now it's mentioned at Forbes.com, Ovik Roy writing it up. Have you heard anything similar to this, Francis, in the buzz in Washington, that 1/3 of the exchange signups, those are the people that we're talking about, the big number that Sebelius is talking about, were previously uninsured? Have you heard anything that low, Francis?
Circles here in Washington, is that the members of Congress that are up for re-election on the Democratic side are worried that the number will be low enough, and 1/3 seems to be low enough, that people in their districts and states will say this didn't turn out to be anything near like what it was, on top of the fact that we don't like it, and the polling continues to show that people don't like it. And so this appears to be, along with the John Harwood story in the New York Times today, about what Democrats overall are expecting separate from the Affordable Care Act, to be another item that is just going to scare the heck out of Democrats in Washington.
Thaddeus?
Well, Francis, I guess the question is to you and to Lara then, as we've talked about in the past, the electoral ramifications of this. So is this Obamacare, the ACA, going to continue to hound Democrats who are tethered to it?
Thaddeus, my understanding of what's going on here in town is that there are two things about the Affordable Care Act that are going to affect Democrats that are tethered to it. One of them is the way that it was rolled out and the way that we've seen in some of the states the execution of it, and John has covered that very thoroughly on this program. Maryland, my home state, over the weekend announcing that they were just going to give up on their exchange entirely and go to the Connecticut system, pour all their data through the Connecticut system and have people go to that infrastructure to sign up for the Affordable Care Act. They're making this decision, a couple of days before this March 31st deadline today. The other thing is as I mentioned, the unpopularity of the legislation itself, even among people who are not trying to use it, people who have insurance through their work that qualifies under the Affordable Care Act, still don't like it and are not happy with the way that it's been presented to them and their families and their colleagues. And so that's what people here are really afraid of right now.
Yes, Lara, answer Thaddeus' question with this fact. I read that 3 out of 4 Democrats are okay with the Affordable Care Act, 1 out of 5 Republicans. Is that enough to win an election, Lara?
Well, I think what you have here is what we've seen in almost all of the polling on almost every issue for about a decade, and that is the polarization that is evident. And this is where I would argue that this isn't going to be either catastrophe for the Democrats, nor is it going to be sort of the big win that they were hoping for. I think what you're likely to see in this situation going forward is that the Democrats who are behind the law will largely stay behind the law, even though they may argue for changes and alterations. Republicans who are against the law will argue against the law, and you're likely to essentially see those Republicans, if they gain power in the Senate, try to repeal aspects of it that are just untenable or very much disliked throughout their constituencies.
Thaddeus, I call on your memory because you were voting for the Affordable Care Act in March of 2010. Did you hear anyone use numbers similar to what we're hearing from Rand? 1/3 of the sign-ups were uninsured, and McKinsey report, which was out last month, that said 27% of those signing up were uninsured. So between 27 and 33%. Did anyone use numbers like that back in 4 years ago?
No, John. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Even when you consider some of the bones of contention that the partisans had, when we looked at it, we always thought that there would be more people who were uninsured that would avail themselves of it, rather than people who would be insured. In fact, the concern was the people who had insurance would lose it or be co-opted to join with Obamacare to try to, for whatever reason. That may be bearing out, but I'm still surprised at the number of uninsured who have not signed up in relation to the ones who had it.
So even though you were in the opposition to it 4 years ago, but you did not hear, even in opposition, that the signups would be this low of the uninsured?
No.
Francis, I mean, he was there. Francis, this is new, Francis. This number, if Rand is right, it's new.
Well, the folks who've been saying this all along, though, John, are the folks who run health insurance providers. These people have been saying all along, there's the people that you want, the people who you're going to try to base this on, don't buy health insurance from us. And that's the reason that premiums continue to, or one of the reasons they gave, the premiums continue to go up. And they were saying this in 2008, 2009, when this first started to germinate. They were saying, the people that you want to buy these policies don't buy health insurance. They think they're bulletproof. They think that they don't need it, and it's going to be hard to convince them to buy it.
Lara, I come to you because this is about politics right now. This means that no one, even